Yeah, obviously very happy to be here again. White Nights is a great event. I was here in Prague last year. Have some interesting stories to share about that over a beer. Hopefully no stories from this year. Also very happy to wrap up the grand influencer marketing trilogy of presentations. I feel some pressure because I'm following YouTube and Pixonic, and I think those guys already said everything worth saying. But who knows? Who knows? So my name is Jiri. I wear badly fitting shirts. I work in the games industry since I was 16 years old. I started my first company when I was 17. I worked in a bunch of positions from game programming to game production to being a CTO. I've started a bunch of companies, blah, 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 blah. And most recently, my previous company was acquired by the Walt Disney Corporation. So my previous actual job was as a vice president of technology at Disney. But this was years ago, and the last 4 years now I spent making indie games, making game distribution platforms, and then eventually working on Matchmade. Matchmade is not an influencer marketing agency. We sometimes get put in that bucket, but we're not. So Matchmade is an influencer marketing platform. So we do two specific things. Firstly, we do a lot of data analysis. So basically, we have a real-time database of about 200 million gaming videos coming from about 2 million gaming channels. And then we have a database of about 17,000 game titles that we cross-reference with the videos. So basically, we go through all these videos, we figure out which game is this video about, or which games is this video about. Then we look at what's the user engagement like, and based on this, we have a pretty good idea of what games are people playing on YouTube, what games are people actually interested in seeing on YouTube, etc. Once we have that data, we can use that to help game developers, game publishers collaborate with influencers. So we basically try to answer the question, for any given game X, what are the best channels to actually talk about it? What are the channels where the audience really would actually like to hear more about that game? And once we've done that matching, we can then help the developers and the influencers figure out what's the right price to pay. How much should I actually be paying for this guy to make a video? Then we help them track the results. We show both parties a real-time dashboard of how the videos are performing. And we plug into the attribution provider of the developer to make sure that we actually see the installs coming in. And we just try to make this whole thing very transparent, very open, and very fair for everybody involved. So that's Matchmade. Does that answer the question, because you were asking? Yeah? Okay, cool. That's what we do. The reason we're doing this is because I have a kind of a theory of how marketing channels evolve. So as an example, if we take the web, first there was Hotwired, and Hotwired realizes that they have an audience and they could maybe be making money from that audience. So the first banner ad is born. So AT&T puts a little shitty GIF animation, and now the web is full of ads because of that. Well, then another guy, a company called Web Connect, they go oh, that's funny. I know a bunch of people with websites, and I know a bunch of people with money. So how about I start introducing them to each other and take 30% from every transaction? So now the first agency is born. Well, then a bunch of agencies are born, the business grows, and then we end up with DoubleClick, which is basically a simple way of scaling this model. It's not very smart. It's just like a glorified spreadsheet. It's a big database with some search functionality. But it helps grow the business, and eventually we end up with today's situation where we have these platforms like Google AdWords, we have Facebook ads, which are these big data, very analytical kind of machine learning systems that are way more clever than marketers ourselves actually are. And I think the same thing is happening with influencer marketing. So we kind of started with the same thing. We had this kind of Hollywood style, setup where somebody realizes that, hey, this PewDiePie guy has a pretty big audience. How about we make some money from that? And then, a bunch of agencies come around. We get all these MCNs. We get all these networks that have, they sign highly exclusive contract with a whole bunch of influencers, and then they manage all the deal flow for them. And then, it grows. It gets it becomes a pain in the ass to run that. So then we get FameBit, which is basically the kind of glorified spreadsheet. I mean, and no offense to Google. I mean, actually, I think we're probably going to be kicked off as people using the YouTube platform after this talk, but whatever. We ended up with FameBit, which is a helpful tool, but it doesn't really do much when it comes to actually helping me figure out like who to work with, how much should I be paying. It doesn't have the kind of the intelligence, the forecasting, the kind of data-driven machine learning component that helps people really figure out who to work with and how to do that most efficiently. So this is what we're trying to build with Matchmade. And I'm not claiming we are there, but I think we're at least on the trajectory to make that happen. I promised Julia, who's running this event, that I would have case studies, so I will have case studies. The first one is a recent campaign we've done. So we work with FuturePlay, which is a Finnish game developer. We are currently running a campaign for Craftaway, which is their latest title. And as a kind of a proof that influencer marketing can drive interesting results, I present to you the... in kind of blue, the number of organic installs this game was getting in certain markets. A week before, we did a video, and then a week after, we did a video. Obviously, the video wasn't made by just anyone. It was made by Herman Garmendia, who is, I think, currently like the world's third biggest YouTuber. So his main channel has maybe 33 million subscribers, and his gaming channel has 25 million subscribers. But the funny thing here is that these are not paid installs. So FuturePlay did not pay a penny to get these installs. They paid Herman for the video. I can't disclose any of the details. But if you look at the percentages, like the jump they got in organic install rate because of one goddamn video is just incredible. So this is the kind of things that can happen when you kind of find the right match, you work with the right influencer. And this is the kind of stuff that is unfortunately pretty hard to measure and predict, even though we really try to do that. My other case study, other example is coming from some local boys. I'm sure some of you guys know the Charged Monkey dudes who are really, really amazing. We've done quite a lot of stuff with them, and I can't share the specific numbers, but when we compare the users that we've gotten from influencer campaigns to organic users, I think the quality of users is simply mind-blowing. So, I mean, ask the guys how if you want details. I unfortunately can't share them with you. But anyway, my point is that this channel can work, but you've probably already heard that from 2 previous speakers, so I will not talk more about that. Instead, I will talk about YouTube last year, YouTube gaming. And the reason I'm not really talking about Twitch, etc., is because like that's not our data set. We look at YouTube exclusively. That will change this year, but it hasn't changed yet. YouTube gaming is growing like crazy. It has been growing like crazy, still does. So we're talking soon 1.4 million active channels. Just making gameplay, like making videos about games on a regular basis. And obviously there's a lot of dead channels as well, but even the channels that have died, they still stick around for quite a long time. So this is a very, very dedicated group of creators. When we look at the sizes of these channels, I would claim that mid-sized channels dominate. So of course, when we just look at the number of channels, the leftmost graph, it's obvious that most of the channels are tiny. So the biggest segment is channels between 10 and 99 subscribers, which, you know, if you're a game developer, that might get you 1 install if you're lucky. But then when we look at just like the total volume of views, it becomes really clear that the biggest benefits to us as developers comes from working with the mid-sized channels. And I mean the mid-sized defined very broadly as like 100K to 10 million. So obviously the range is large. But if you can figure out a way to work with a large number of these mid-sized users, mid-sized channels, then you can actually reach a really, really large audience. And then, of course, if you only just really need to impress your boss, then the way to do that is by going to one of these channels with more than 10 million subscribers and get them to make one video, and that one video will drive a stupid number of installs, and you're going to look very good, and you're going to have a very, very hard time repeating that experience, or at least it's going to get very, very expensive very soon. But we can try to help out if that's what you want. Then when we talk about countries, there's a funny phenomena where it would appear that almost every channel is from the US, which somehow actually isn't true. So there's a bit of a trend where YouTubers really like to present themselves as being from the US, and and they might be. They might not be lying, but there's examples where you might have a US-based channel that is English-speaking channel where 5% of their actual users are their fans are from the US and 90% are from Russia. So the self-reported numbers don't always add up. But you can still see some interesting differences here. So when you compare the kind of the total subscribers count to the total views count, you can see that some countries really stick out. So for example, Brazil has really, really low viewership numbers compared to the subscriber counts. Or where you look at like Japan, Korea, or Vietnam, you can actually see that the total views is a lot more than you would expect based on the subscriber count. And I think this is kind of just tying into the previous speakers mentioned that don't ever look at the subscriber counts. They don't actually really matter. But yeah, this is just, maybe it's useful to take a photo or just get the presentation from me. Another big difference, if we look at the countries, is in the types of games, the platforms that they cover. So when we start from India, 60% of the games covered on Indian channels are mobile games. And then we go to Italy, where we're talking about 8%. And you can see there's like one thing that surprises people is that games available on console, so both kind of like home consoles and handheld consoles, are actually a massive, massive number, a massive chunk of YouTube gaming. So, I mean, often they might be the PC versions of those games, but still the fact is that the majority of those games are available on console, and I think this is one of those opportunities that game developers should really wake up to, that you can actually do a lot more with console games. Downside being that it's really hard to track the performance of console game campaigns because you can't get a proper like attribution ping back. Anyway, this happened in 2017. I don't know if people have been following the scene, but there was a kind of a big ruckus about demonetization by YouTube. And if you go to these, like, for example, subreddits where YouTube creators hang out, there's a theory. And usually the theory goes that at some point, summer of 2017, YouTube decided to get a little bit more aggressive on turning off advertising for certain channels because they had some unfortunate experiences with, Al-Qaeda training videos having ads next to them, which is understandable that kind of sucks. So, gaming videos, because often, we have words like war and guns and killing and all this really cool stuff in games. It turns out gaming videos get hit really hard by this demonetization. And then the theory continues that, well, then maybe YouTube has another algorithm that actually kind of punishes demonetized videos so they get less views. Or maybe influencers just change their behavior because they're not getting paid as much as they used to. Or maybe it's both. I honestly don't know. I hope that YouTube knows. None of my business. But the end result is that last year, at some point, sponsored content suddenly became a lot more interesting for YouTubers because they were making less money from YouTube ads than they used to. And I think another thing that it caused is this, that it almost looks like YouTube gaming peaked in August. So when we look at all the big games on YouTube, you can kind of see that from August onwards, it's not looking super happy. And I mean, when you just consider the absolute numbers we're talking about, we're talking billions of views less, for Minecraft. Where, just look at any game here. The actual, it might not look like much, but it's a massive, massive drop on the number of views these gaming videos are getting. And this is a huge trend. This is reshaping the whole influencer scene in gaming. And then, of course, another big trend from last year was this, right? So when I was doing a similar presentation at Nordic Game in May, PUBG looked unstoppable. PUBG was going to be the future of YouTube gaming, the future of influencers, and nothing else would matter. And then at some point Epic realized that holy shit, like this PUBG thing is pretty cool. We have a pretty cool game, so how about we add like a battle royale mode? And yeah, something happened. So whereas like all those other games are getting fucked, Fortnite is just pushing up. And you can see that this is like, we're counting both Fortnite and the Fortnite Battle Royale version. So when you combine those two, the numbers are even bigger. And this has been the biggest trend of 2017 outside of the fact that everything else is getting screwed. And then finally, if we look at one more graph on this topic, so this is basically games that were getting zero videos half a year ago or during the last half a year and that have since grown significantly. You can see a bit of a trend here. So let's see. Fortnite. Rules of Survival. What is that? Battle Royale. Oh, what's Free Fire Battlegrounds? Yeah, sounds a bit similar. Knives Out, also Battle Royale. So like basically the story of YouTube right now, YouTube gaming is right now that everything else is suffering except Battle Royale games. So what to expect this year? It's early days, so who am I to tell? But let's try. One thing that happened was Logan Paul, Suicide Forest, all that. You've probably heard about it. And I mean, obviously, he's not the first YouTuber to misbehave, but maybe he's kind of the last straw. So recently, both Twitch and YouTube have come out with pretty clear statements on what they expect from their creator community. And I think this is all driven by the fact that if the community doesn't start self-regulating, if the platform holders don't, make their kind of biggest names behave, then somebody else is going to do it for them, and that usually doesn't really work that well for tech companies. So there's a lot of new guidelines, a lot of new community rules, and there's probably going to be a lot more kind of awareness around what kind of content is acceptable and what kind of content is not. And this ties into sponsored content. So there's pretty clear rules on advertisements, like so sponsored videos on YouTube, on sponsored content on Twitch. And I think because of this, there will be more scrutiny on whether people follow those rules. So I think what I'm saying here is that I think it's important for us as potential advertisers to really pay attention to who we work with. Don't work with the assholes because you will suffer for it, and make sure you always follow all the advertising rules that are out there in different countries. The second thing that I think is affecting the whole industry is GDPR. I doubt there's anyone who hasn't heard that term yet. Interesting thing about the GDPR is that it's about tracking individuals, tracking private persons, which is something that a lot of influencer marketing platforms don't do. So, for example, Matchmade. We don't know or really give a shit about an individual user. We don't know what an individual user wants to see or what they watch, and we don't want to know that. We only look at audiences. We look at what does the audience of this influencer want to see, which I think when GDPR actually kicks in and we see the real impact of it, I think influencer marketing will actually start making a lot more sense for a lot of companies that are a little bit careful about GDPR. Another thing that I think is clearly happening is that there's more and more demand for ROI, as in the Pixonic presentation. There's more demand for a good understanding of what am I getting for my money, and on the other hand, there's more demand from the influencers to understand what should they be paid, what should they be earning, what's the right price for their stuff. So there's a clear trend towards more data, more kind of demand to see performance on both sides. Which I think for game developers, that's amazing, because most of us are used to this very kind of numbers-driven marketing approach. And even though that approach will never fully map to YouTube and influencers, but I think it's still healthy that both sides have an understanding that it's not cool to just give someone $50K and only get a video for it. You need to understand what else are you getting, what are the results, and you need to be able to track them. There might be some pretty big shifts in platform balance, because I think a lot of YouTube creators got a little bit pissed off about all the recent changes and all the turbulence. But I mean, kudos to YouTube for, I think, addressing all those concerns really, really well. So I don't think YouTube is actually going to lose creators, but I think there's going to be more discussion about that, and I think more creators are going to be looking into alternatives, which might be an opportunity for game developers. Maybe there's a growing platform where a bunch of influencers are looking for sponsorships, and maybe that's an opportunity for you to reach out to them and be the sponsor. We have a Caffeine launched by some former Apple engineers that is super, super focused on the mobile kind of streaming experience. We have direct purchasing now on Mixer for Xbox games, on Twitch for PC stuff, which I think is really interesting to a lot of, obviously a lot of developers, but a lot of influencers as well. I also think that what's going to happen there is that once the influencers see how poorly premium games actually convert compared to free-to-play, they might be less enthusiastic about that. And then finally, you can also see that Snap, even though they're getting a beating from Facebook, Snap is clearly trying to improve what they offer to the influencers. So, I mean, I understand that Snap might not work for a lot of gaming titles, but they are really pushing for it, and I think we'll see some big changes this year. And also, Facebook is really pushing their video product, and they're really getting influencers on board. And I know that Facebook works as an ad channel tremendously well for a lot of developers, so I think there's going to be more opportunities to work with influencers there as well. But I mean, having said that, I think YouTube is still going to be the big dog. And I mean, Twitch, of course, right there with them. So anyway, to conclude, if we kind of look at what's actually going to happen, this is almost the same graph that you saw earlier. But what's going to happen is two things. Well, first of all, there's going to be an avalanche of battle royale games that are going to be pushed to every single influencer out there, and there's going to be a lot of sponsored campaigns for battle royale games, and because of that, it's not going to work out for most people. And the second thing that is happening already is that Clash Royale has been the kind of the lifeline of many successful YouTubers for many years. And now that Clash has just tanked, we've gone from like on 1.4 million total views to what, like 370 million, like a crazy decline. And this is really hurting a lot of influencers that have really dedicated fan bases. And right now, a lot of those guys, they first move to PUBG and then they move to Fortnite. But I think that whoever is able to kind of seize on that opportunity, whoever makes the game that appeals to the Clash Royale channels and their fans will be the biggest winner of this whole like influencer marketing scene in 2018. So you should go and do that. Thank you.